Yeah, I haven't watched this one in a long time.
Yeah. Well, as I mentioned before, I think that in the current moment in America where voting rights are so systematically under attack, my thoughts immediately simply go back to this moment, this time, and all that happened during the early 1960s in the civil rights movement. And in these communities, and the Birmingham struggle, in fact, is what turned John F. Kennedy in favor of civil rights legislation.
That's right.
Because he had resisted it up till that time. But it was Birmingham that turned the corner. And it was the kids demonstrating in Birmingham and leaving their schools that specifically turned the corner. And it was the dogs and the fire hoses that made it no longer acceptable for the White House, which was extremely fearful of the political repercussions in the South, of turning in favor of civil rights.
That's right, because this event was covered in the media, it was seen all around the world, and it really sort of changed the whole reaction to the civil rights movement. Yeah, absolutely.
And, and for the film to have captured in so much detail, I mean, documentaries frequently stand or fall on the characters who populate them. And it's a big job to get one good character to really deliver a documentary. But you've got 20 good characters in this movie, and that's, to me, a lot of its strength.
Well, I would say one of the reasons that, I said at the beginning of this, when you brought me up before the audience, one of the reasons that this film is so special to me is because in finding all of these people that Spike interviewed, and I was at some of these interviews, when I would listen to the interviews afterward in the editing room, it was like listening to my family, my aunts and my cousins, my uncles. So I really connected with all the rhythm patterns and everything they were saying. And it was, and these people felt, one of the good things when you're making a documentary that if you can make it successful is when you sit down with people and they trust you and they want to open themselves up to you. And every person that Spike sat down with, they trusted Spike. They respected him. And they felt they could be open with him. And you can see that. And if anybody has seen his Katrina films, it's the same thing. The people felt open, they felt they could be human, and that's what comes through when you watch this material. You're right, there's so many great people in this film, and they're just so emotional and they're so human, which is fascinating, just fascinating.
And one of the advantages for a white audience is that most white people don't spend a lot of time with black families or black people. And that's certainly true in Vermont. But the dimensionality, there at the same time that there is this terrible sadness, there is also huge vitality in the movie, I think.
Well, you can hear it though in the humor, in the way they talk. It's like people talking about when the young woman was talking about her mother, and she was saying, her mother was saying she had that dream there was going to be blood, and they all said, "Whoa,"
Yeah.
And the scene when Mrs. McNair's talking about making a chicken, and Denise was on the counter and her mother was upset. I mean, all this, you get all this complexity of her personalities just comes through.
Yeah, no, the details, the vivid.
It's vivid.
There are pictures, talking in pictures. The fact that, the former Attorney General Katzenbach is interviewed, that almost bizarre sort of confessional of George Wallace.
Well, what's fascinating about that sequence with George Wallace is he was one of the people that when we reached out to his people, they wanted all the questions. They wanted to be able to see all the questions. So We dutifully put together the questions, and I gave them to Spike, and he sent them to Wallace's people. The thing is, I don't think he even read any of the questions, because he didn't answer any of them. So Spike just shot. What was also fascinating, watching this film cinematically, Ellen Kuras is a wonderful cinematographer. This was the second film that she had shot for Spike. And there's a quality to the way she framed the interviews. There's a really very interesting quality to the way she did the photographs. I had seen, I think before this film, I had seen the Chet Baker documentary, Let's Get Lost. And Bruce Weber had done some wonderful things with the photographs. They were handheld and had them moving around. And I remember saying to Ellen when she was starting to shoot these stills, let's give it that same kind of feel. Let's not do statics and stuff. Let's have them movement and flares and flashes, you know. So she really was able to really do it. She's a fantastic cinematographer.
Absolutely. You know, there's intimacy to the picture. There is a timelessness to the picture. It's made in 1999.
97.
One of the factual things that I wanted to make sure I got right, when the Attorney General was talking about the informers who identified Chambliss, these were informers that could have created, there were FBI informants who knew at the time of the bombing exactly who did it.
Yeah, they knew. They didn't come forward 2 years later, but they didn't.
So there were FBI
informants,
who, going back, we should go back and watch MLK, MKI. You had FBI informants who were in the hire of the Kennedy administration, who knew who did it immediately and did not come forward and did not initiate an FBI investigation and prosecution. And it took 14 years
for that.
And then tracking down those same informants, which is extraordinary to me.
And they reopened the case after this film.
Yeah, after the film?
After the film.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
The police have just said that anybody parked on Merchants Road or Main Street, they're going to start towing cars within about 20 minutes.
Okay.
Just to make
In
that
20 minutes, cars parked on Merchants Road or Main Street will be towed, apparently. Or will start being towed. So maybe we should try to finish quickly. I don't want half the audience to walk out on us right now. In any case, let's
Quick questions, man.
yeah, right. I got some more questions, but let's see if somebody in the audience wants to say something, and we can, sort of take it from there. I'm sure people do have questions. Apart from where your car's parked, because probably some people don't know what the park but yes, right back here, and then down here. Yes.
The final shot with Mrs. Robertson, were you there when she spoke, and if not, what was it like to see that for the first time? It was just utterly beautiful and exquisite.
The last shot of Mrs. Robertson, was Sam there when she spoke, and what was his reaction to it?
I was there, and I thought it was extremely emotional. And it's that funny thing, sometimes when you're shooting an interview, you're in the presence of the person who's being interviewed, you have one reaction, and then when you're in the edit room and you see it, you have a different reaction. So my reaction when I saw it in the edit room was even more powerful and more emotional to me. Because she was undressing herself in front of Spike. She was letting herself be honest. It was just like, wow, just very powerful. See when Miss McNair was talking about going to the morgue to see Denise's body. Wow. And then going home to her and crying and screaming. Just emotional. These are some of the most emotional interviews I think I've ever worked on. Both as a director and as an editor.
And there's a term you used in an earlier conversation we had today about the unguarded subject.
Mm-hmm.
And really, in documentary filmmaking, absolutely, and even in narrative filmmaking, what you're always trying to achieve is the unguarded inflection, the uninflected moment, the unguarded moment. film is so intimate, allows someone to be revealed so that you start to observe detail of human behavior and emotion that is distinct and original and natural and compelling. And I think this film is just loaded with it. It's really extraordinary. Yes, back here. Yes.
It's obviously a beautiful film and an important subject. I'm wondering, on technical level, you guys must have talked a lot about framing the interviews. You're in extreme close-up for so much of it. Was that like because you wanted to be so intimate, or was TV in because it's on HBO? Was that part of it?
No, it was because we wanted to be intimate. You know, it's funny, I'm watching the interviews today, and I just shot yesterday an interview with Bob Cousy, the Boston Celtics, for a documentary I'm working on about Bill Russell. And I've gotten into the pattern now of being a little more, I almost think I've been almost a little too perfunctory in how I shoot the interviews now. And I'm thinking as I watch this, I said, maybe next time I gotta get a little tighter and change up the frames, the composition. Because that's what Ellen decided to do. Her and Spike had talked about how to shoot them in framing. But the other reaction was that some of the people who saw this in the business, when it came on HBO, some people felt we had shot them too tight, you know, and cut off the frames, cut off the head. But that was intentional. It was definitely intentional. And I think it worked extremely well.
Absolutely. Yes.
There was one young woman, sister of one of the victims, who I believe had to identify or ended up identifying the body. And she looked haunted to a degree that was unsettling.
Yeah.
Do you have any sense of, it's now 25 years almost since the film was made, whether she's been able to cope?
I don't know. I mean, we screened the film after we finished it to a large audience in the Birmingham theater. I'm not sure she was there. Mrs. Robertson was there. The McNairs were there. I don't remember this young woman being there. Obviously, she was suffering with PTSD, from what she'd been having that experience. But I don't know what happened to her poetry. Yeah. This lady had a question.
Yeah?
Yes.
Oh, my question was the same about the closeness of your close-ups and who chose to do that. And I just thought it was so effective because literally the pain is coming out of their pores, and the pores are right in your face. And
It was Ellen and Spike.
It was thank you.
Miss you had a question.
Frankie?
It isn't a question, it's just a comment. I'm extremely moved by all of this. But what is actually terrifying is that was a bomb that was planted, and yes, people obviously knew at the time, but it took 14 years for it to come to trial. Now, young African Americans are being shot every day, and it's on people's phones. There isn't, the documentary is running right now.
Constantly, absolutely.
And that is absolutely terrifying.
Yeah.
Although we are also in a dynamic political situation where there are elements of response, to that which have raised the national conversation. The difficult, tricky point is that the politics of this moment are so complex on so many levels, and the division is so deep. I think there was a sense during the civil rights movement that it could prevail.
Yeah.
We shall overcome. And there was such mobilization that you could not resist being, as a thinking person in responding to. It was a difficult struggle, but it achieved so much. We were talking about it a little bit earlier. The civil rights movement in the 1960s was hugely successful. And we are now finding that the backlash is only beginning to sort of really knuckle in, it seems to me. And so this moment is extremely critical, because how do we preserve those very hard-fought victories, especially in the area of voting rights, that the civil rights movement was all about? And to me, it's sacrilegious given the historical importance of this moment. After so many years of slavery and Jim Crow and failed Reconstruction, all of that, finally a breakthrough that was historic. And now the history doesn't seem to matter.
No, and it's constant fight. You have to keep fighting. You have to constantly keep fighting to make sure these things stay in place. You know.
Yeah. So anyway, good comment, Frankie. Quick question, and then again, I don't want people to. Yes, go ahead.
Well, if you
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
So, two thoughts. One is a thought, one's a question. I appreciate the evergreen nature of this. George Wallace saying, "Here's my black friend." I won't say the name of the white person in Vermont who said that to me when he was claiming he's not racist, like, I have a black friend.
Yeah.
So the evergreen nature of this film is really poignant right now. The question is the unguarded subject. And I was wondering, with some of the interviews, what's the relationship with the interviewee if they, after crying, say, don't use that? I guess, what's the understanding, what's the agreement when you do get that vulnerability, and then they might say, please don't show that? I don't know if that comes up, maybe they recognize the importance of it.
Sure. It's a good question.
It comes up. In this particular case, no one ever said that. But I have been in situations where I've done something with some of the subject, and at the end of that interview, they'll say, please don't use that. Or I've been in situations where we've finished shooting the interview and the subject is about to say something, and he knows or she knows that they don't really want it on camera. But my tendency would normally be to say, let's keep shooting. But now I've gotten to the point where I'll say to the cameraman, I'll say to the subject, you know, I was about to shoot this, but I won't, because if you don't want it on camera, don't tempt me to put it on. You know, I'm trying to be respectful now. It still happens. I mean, I just did a film where I was covering this artist out in California, Betty Sarr, and her daughter was saying some stuff about how she was very intense back when her work came out against some artists. Against Carol Walker. And her daughter emailed me the next day and said, I really don't want to talk. I know I talked about my mother's intensity with Carol Walker, but I really don't want it in the film. Could you not do it? So I didn't do it. You know, I respected her, you know, her feelings. I said, I will put it in. And I didn't. You know.
Yeah, increasingly in the world of documentary, ethics discussions, which are always a moving target, tend towards the feeling that if a subject, even who may have signed a release, chooses after the fact to withdraw their permission to even all of their interview, that's a legitimate request. There's no hard and fast rule.
It's not hard and fast.
But yes, a sensitive, responsive filmmaker will respect that. I mean, you also see in the world of salacious television clear ambushes taking place, and that's a different kind of filmmaking.
Tiger King.
Yeah, right. Unbelievable. So, Sam, tell me, I mean, you and I are about the same age, I think, but what drew you into film? I mean, we talked a little bit earlier, you had a love of cinema, for one thing, that was pretty far-reaching, but just in general, your initial impulses, your dreams, your thoughts that drew you towards film.
I'm going to do it quickly because I already told Jasper the whole story. But I grew up in a household where I could watch, in the old days you watched 3 channels, ABC, CBS, NBC, and then the local independent channels, WOR, WPIX. And WOR had a series that they used to own. Somebody's talking about WOR?
New Yorkers.
Oh, New Yorkers. They used to own the RKO Library. And the RKO Library was RKO's film studio in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. They made films like Gunga Din, Citizen Kane, Out of the Past, And I used to watch those films religiously. And I loved Burt Lancaster and Ava Gardner and Kirk Douglas. I just loved watching movies. But then I never thought about getting into business, so I was in college with the idea of becoming a businessman. I was studying marketing. I was miserable in my junior year. I went to see a counselor. And I said I was looking for an internship. So she said, what do you like, Sam? I said, I love reading books and I love old movies. And she said, well, there's a program It had been started in 1968 after Dr. King's assassination to get more people of color shooting film, editing film, doing sound, producing. And it was a one-year program, 2 nights a week, the local public television station. I got into the program, and the first thing I did, I was an assistant cameraman on one of our student shoots. I was a lousy assistant cameraman, but they put me in the editing room. And I remember working on an upright moviola.
That's right, yeah.
And I was cutting some 16 millimeter. They showed me how to cut the film with this splicer and splice it together. And we were doing a little montage of Lincoln Center. And I put this 1 minute sequence together, and I looked at it on the moviola, and I didn't like how the shots were unfolding, so I took them off the moviola, put it on the synchronizer, switched the shots around, and when I put it back up on the moviola, it was like a light bulb went off. I said, oh shit, I created something.
Yeah. Right.
And from that point on, I was hooked.
That was it. Great story. Sam's work, I mean, look on the IMDb and you'll see a number of films, a number of which you can access. You have like dozens of credits. And many of them, you know, are exploring different aspects of African American culture and history, and really probing it to add dimension to what we may think we know about it. I mean, some of them are focused on characters. He's done films on Sammy Davis Jr., on Marvin Gaye, on the election of Barack Obama. He's currently working on a film about Bill Russell. He's got a new project about Arthur Ashe that he's developing. This guy is extremely prolific and has added substantially to our ability to experience, understand, directly connect with lived, important, historically resonant, historic experience, the African American experience, and in a way that also contextualizes it within, in a way that's also totally connected to white culture. As I say, the civil rights movement clearly, you know, so important historically, also included a lot of young white people who were part of the freedom rides. I mean, the MLK FBI film, and talking about, you know, King's allies in the civil rights movement, including important white allies that he had. So the civil rights history is actually a shared history in part, and that's an important thing to understand about it. It's not separate from our own experience as
Part of the American experience.
It's the American experience. And so Sam is a filmmaker who is contributing substantially to a better understanding of the American experience. And for that, we are honoring him this year with our Vermont teddy bear. I don't know who's got the teddy bears. Is that happening tonight? I guess not. You'll get it. The teddy bears were here in strength yesterday. Where'd they go? Anyway, Sam's visit has been short. This is our second session. It's fabulous. Sam has agreed, like Barbara Koppel and a couple of our other perennial honorees, to come back and for us to see